Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Pound, and we are studying Chapter 1.3 on taxonomy from Purposeful Design Life Science. Today's section we're going to talk about is Section 134 about Eukarya from your textbook. Now, this is the last section in your book, so you can start studying for your test. You have all the information you need. So, our objectives today will be to distinguish between eukaryotes and prokaryotes and describe the four kingdoms in domain Eukarya. So a eukaryote is an organism composed of one or more cells containing a visible nucleus. Remember, a prokaryote does not have a visible nucleus. So the difference here is eukaryote has a nucleus. Now, one kingdom that is in domain Eukarya are the protista. And this is a eukaryotic organism that cannot be classified as a fungi, a plant, or an animal. Now, here you can see these are called euglena, and they are single-celled protist. And the importance of protists are they produce much of the oxygen living things breathe. They help cattle and termites digest. So that's why I have this some cattle in the background eating. And some examples are algae, giant kelp, which might be surprising because they can be multicellular. But the reason giant kelp is not a plant, it is a protist, is because they do not reproduce through seeds or spores. So that's a key there. They actually produced this domain or this kingdom. Because there were things that just didn't fit in the other ones. So it's kind of a catch-all for everything else. There's also fungi. These are non-green organisms that reproduce through spores and absorb their food. And their importance are that they transport important nutrients from soil to tree roots. Scientists have discovered a symbiotic relationship between trees and fungus, and trees are healthier when they have fungus around their roots. They're used to make antibiotics. In fact, penicillin, you actually have seen it probably growing in your refrigerator. It's the gray fungus that grows on your food after a while. That's penicillin. It's useful in making cheese and bread. In fact, this cheese up here, the crust around it is probably a fungus. And for bread, we use yeast in bread that makes it rise. So some examples are yeast, molds, and mushrooms. There's also lichen. Now, lichen is an organism formed by a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an alga or a cyanobacterium. So, all kind of the crusty lichen that grows on rocks and trees and things, that's actually not just one organism, it's two organisms living together, and one is a fungus. The algae provides food through photosynthesis, or the cyanobacteria does, and the fungus supplies like water and other nutrients. Then there's plants, and that's plantae. They are multicellular organisms that produce their own food through photosynthesis, and they reproduce through seeds or spores. A scientist who studies plants is called a botanist. So when you study plants, that is botany. And some examples are ginkgo and moss, and there are all kinds of plants all over, but the moss covering these rocks are plants. Then there's animals, kingdom Animalia. These are multicellular organisms that have to obtain their food to survive. And a scientist who studies animals is called a zoologist. And so studying animals is zoology. And some examples are sponge and corals, and you can think of all kinds of examples, I'm sure. Um, So our objectives today were to distinguish between eukaryotes and prokaryotes, eukaryotes having a nucleus, prokaryotes don't, and describe the four kingdoms in domain Eukarya, which are Protista, fungi, plantae, and Animalia. So don't forget your 5 questions in your margin and to keep watching this video to answer the questions at the end. And also start studying for that test.